All right, welcome back. So in the previous video, we have worked on the filtering feature. And I forgot to take my debugger command out. So let me take this out. Let me also show you something else. I don't know if you've noticed, but I have created a to-do nav inside this function and use getElementById to get hold of this element. But I also have the same variable defined here. So this is fine. It doesn't make a difference. This variable is local to this function. However, what I want to say is that if I were to take this out, the program will still work. So if we save this and go back and click on any of these, we'll still have the same feature. And this is due to JavaScript's hoisting feature. And so if you recall this from the lecture notes, the way each variable is hoisted to the top of its scope. So probably a helpful way of thinking about it is that you can imagine this variable declaration when JavaScript goes about actually running your code. You can imagine that this is moved to the top of the file. And so you have access to that variable, even though technically it is declared further down on line 108. So in fact, it might be a better practice for us to kind of keep all of these variable declarations in one place. So we can take this one, bring it all the way to the top, and also this one, bring it to the top. So what we have here is like get HTML elements. That's what we're doing here. And then we have a bunch of functions that are defining the logic of our application. Some of them are focused on rendering the UI. Some of them are focused on handling various events. So reacting to basically or capturing the user interaction with the application. And then here we got all the event listeners. So we can maybe put all of them in one line. Let's bring it out, make this more concise. There we go. And here's the last one. Okay, so all the event listeners, the HTML element that we need, and a state. Okay, so one other thing that I want to add to the application for now is the ability to mark a to-do as completed. So I want that happen when I click on a to-do. So right now nothing happens here, but when I click on a to-do, I want to be able to flip it or flip the completed status of it. If it's like completed, it would be active. If it's active, it would become completed. So we can go about doing this in a few different ways. One of them would be to add a event listener to each one of these to-do items. So we can do that somewhere, like maybe when we create these elements, which is here. So when I create like the to-do items or to-do text, I can go and add an event listener. That event listener could listen to, for example, click event. So if somebody clicked on it, then we capture that and we handle that event by like updating the completed attribute of that to-do. I would want to go and manage this in a slightly different way, in a sense that rather than adding an event listener to each one of these to-dos, I'm going to add an event listener to the container of them, which is the to-do list. So if you look over here, we've got this to-do list that has like all these to-dos. And I've already done something similar to this if you've paid attention. When I was managing the click on different filters, I actually added event listener to the nav bar rather than adding event listener individually to each one of these items. And so there's an argument to be made about why you might want to do something like this. And that has to do with the number of event listeners that you need to add. So event listeners are basically, they have an overhead for the application, and the application pays a toll on the performance the more event listeners you add. And so if there's an opportunity to minimize the number of them, an argument can be made to embrace that opportunity and go for it. And this probably makes even more sense when it comes to the to-dos, because the list of the to-dos is a dynamic list, and you may end up with like a very long list of to-dos. You may keep adding new ones, deleting old ones. And so potentially you're going to be firing up a lot of event listeners, and if the app runs for a very long time, especially these days, the way people work with applications, I've seen, people don't really close their tab. The app is always open, always running. And so it might be to our advantage if we have just one event listener that is attached to the section that holds the list of all the to-dos, rather than individually adding them to each of the to-do items. What we can do is we can write a little more code to figure out which one of the children's of this parent element, the section, was clicked on. So that's what I'm going to do. I will take hold of the const. So this is the to-do list. Let's call it the to-do list. There we go. And then I will go and add a event listener to the to-do list and do something similar to this. We basically want to manage click, but handle click on to-do list. So I need to create a new function for it. Again, I'm going to be getting the event. And so when we get the event, as you know, we have event target, right? And the event target is going to actually show us what was the actual element that the event occurred on. So if we click on any of these children, the target element is going to be that child. So we can like give that a try. Let's do a quick console log and look at what happens. So let's go to the console, clean this up, and if I go and like click here, so I got like the div with the to-do list. If I like click somewhere in the middle, I've got the whole to-do item, right? Whereas here I got the to-do text, here I got the whole to-do item, right? So you kind of get exactly that element that you clicked on. It might be helpful to me if I give like a unique ID to each one of these to-dos. And I mean, we already have that in the estate. So each to-do has an ID. We just need to put that ID on the HTML element so that then I can like read it back from the UI. So here, when we actually create the to-do item, maybe I add it to the to-do text. That'd be more fun to experiment with. So if like you click somewhere in the middle, it's not going to work, but you have to like click on the text to flip it, complete it or not. It's just a design decision. It's not like this is the right or wrong way to do it. But anyways, I can go and like here when I create it, I can say set attribute and give it a ID. And then you can just give it the to-do dot ID. All right, so if we save this and we go and try to take a look at these elements, you're gonna see now each one of these has an ID, right? So ID of 1, ID of 2, ID of 3. So this is fine, but you gotta be a little careful about designing something like this, because if the app was more complex and you had like more lists and you wanted to come up with a similar strategy, then just giving a ID like, hey, your ID is 1 is a risky design, because then if you've got other lists in other parts of the app, they may end up having like the same ID. So a better strategy is to sort of add a prefix to it. So maybe something similar to the class that we give it. We can do this. We can use template strings. We can say to do text and then go and add the ID to it. All right. So let's save this and take a look at it now. So now it should be to do text -1, to do text -2, right? So that's a little safer. It's a better ID to assign to these elements. Okay, so now that we have this, we can come over here and see what we get for the ID, right? If we click on it. So let's go back to the console, clean the console, and like click here. So I get to do text 1, to do text 2, to do text 3. And also be careful if I like go past the area that the text is, then like I get this like empty string, right? So this gives me the actual ID, and then like somewhere here it gives me empty string, right? So we can basically say if the if the event target ID, if this includes, so like this is the common part between all of them, right? So if it includes this, it is the item that I'm interested in. If it doesn't include that, that's not really the item that I'm interested in. Right, so this helps me to distinguish between getting these like elements that don't have an ID and the ones that have the ID and they have actually the ID that I want. So if I save this, clean this, and go and like click on these, right, I get them, and if I click in between, nothing basically happens. Okay, good. So now the next thing to do is to actually now get the ID out of it. And so if the ID looks like this, we can do some of the things we did before. We can go and say split this with the dash, and that would give us an array that's going to look like this. It's going to give us like to do, text, and 1. And so this array, we're going to need the last element in it, so we can do pop, and that's going to give us 1. And one other thing you want to be careful is that this is actually the string 1. We are using actual numbers, so if you want this to be converted to number, you gotta like do something like this. Maybe let's break this to like 2 lines of code. So const to do ID, and then const to do ID number, and put this here. Okay, you can break this into more lines, like get these first, split it next, do the pop. It adds like, makes the code more readable if you would like to do it that way. All right, but once you have the ID, then what you would want to do is to actually find it in the array of to-dos. So we're going to be doing something similar to this business here. Iterate over all the to-dos, right? And check if that to-dos at that index, if you look at its ID, is it going to be the same as this ID that you extracted? If that is the case, then you want to change the completed, right? So you want to say to-dos at I completed. Now, if this completed is true, you want to flip it to false. If it's false, you want to flip it to true. One trick to do this in a single line of code is this. You basically say, take its value, whatever it is, negate it, and store it back, right? And so this should update the to-do, the completed state of the to-do. And again, going back to the whole strategy that user interacts, you update the state, then UI needs to change. You kind of need to come and call render to-dos after this, right? So that the cycle is complete, right? So user interacted, you have an event listener, it goes about the logic to update the state. The state is updated, then you trigger rendering the UI, and then you should see the UI change. So let's save this, come back here, and I don't think we need to look at the console anymore. We can just click. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more so you see exactly this is happening. So, right, there you go. So we are able to mark to-dos as completed. There are still other things that we need to implement here. Like I want to update here. This is right now hard-coded, 2 items left. I didn't implement this. I may want to mark all the tasks as completed. I didn't implement this. I may want to delete the ones that are implemented, that are completed, and this is not implemented. And I want to implement these later. But right now, I just want to take a moment and look at what we had done. This is fairly simple program, and it mostly follows structured programming and procedural programming style, in a sense that the code executes sort of in the same sequence that's written. You use things like for loop, so loops to repeat some operations. You use conditional statements to conditionally do some things. These are hallmarks of structured programming. And then you organize your code into procedures, smaller procedures. That's usually like one advantage of it is for reuse, but it also gives you other advantages like a scoping, basic readability of the code. And so those are parts of procedural programming. Now what I want to move the lecture to is to switch gear and change the style of how we are implementing this application, because one of my goals is to sort of implement the same idea, the same app, using 3 different paradigm of programming. So we've just seen the first one. In the next video, we're going to switch gear and go to start over exploring functional programming paradigm and refactor the application and add some more features to it.